We'd laughed so hard we'd both doubled over while tears poured from our eyes and into our laps. Wynn had mostly kept a very low-key profile while he waited on his new passport, license, and necessary identifications from someone named Mandrake. We hadn't introduced him around to anyone, and our trips to Madame Zoltar's were done under the radar with great care taken to keep him hidden. There had been a load of loose ends from our last endeavor with the body snatchers from the funeral parlor, a boatload of them. In particular, when the investigation had first launched, the description the accused had given to the investigating officers of a man in a crazy Christmas sweater. We couldn't afford to have Wynn discovered simply because, in all reality, he's Balthazar and, as far as the law's concerned, responsible for all of Balthazar's crimes. We needed to get all our ducks in a row, and we needed to do it soon. But still, when people drove by the house and caught him outside, throwing a ball to whiskey or sitting with me while we watched the sunset, my phone literally burned up the cell towers with calls from concerned folks with questions about who my gentleman caller might be. Thus far, I'd evaded the nosy Nellies by telling them I had some old friends from college dropping by on and off during the summer months, and that's who they must have seen. I didn't doubt they were truly concerned. I loved my fellow Ebb Fallers with all my heart. Truly, when you needed them, they were there with casseroles and sympathy. But there was no way you could tell me those phone calls were 100% out of concern. And then there was Dana. I held my breath every time Dana dropped by. I was sure he was eventually going to make mention of the big coup in Seattle at Vera Brothers' funeral home, the funeral home we'd barely escaped without police interference, and the case of the owners selling body parts. I mean, Dana had actually met Wynn when he was wearing my ugly Christmas sweater on his person, which, granted, was only one among many pretty outlandish statements the accused in the case had babbled on and on about. Still, Wynn's sweater, along with his accent, matched the Vera brothers' description exactly. And if Dana ever put two and two together... And it wasn't as if Officer Rigid didn't watch the news. That would be like saying a stockbroker didn't watch the Dow. The case had made national news for Pete's sake. But he hadn't even mentioned he'd met Wynn, and I'd seen him many times over the last year since the incident in question. Making this whole thing curious indeed. Dana was a tried and true dog with a bone. The only thing I could think of that had kept him from mentioning it was that he simply hadn't made the connection between Wynn and the lunatic man the Vera brothers described. I don't know how many men Dana encountered in ugly Christmas sweaters like the one Wynn wore that day, but it was the only plausible explanation we had because my favorite police officer was a crackerjack. He noticed everything. Add to that, our worry only intensified when a program called Primed for Crime aired recently, showing a soundbite of the Vera brothers' case and one of the goons we'd encountered carrying on about a man with a British accent and a Christmas sweater. It was a mere blip of a scene and hardly made mention of in the broadcast, but it still worried me it would trigger Dana and he'd start to ask questions. Still, for now, we were in the clear. I'd managed to keep everyone else at bay, but I couldn't do that forever. Not if Wynn ever wanted to have a life worth getting up for in the morning. Anyway, I was in the midst of relishing my fake, spongy, cake-filled moment on this unseasonably warmish last day of November and sipping on some of Enzo's amazing hazelnut brew while I thought over what to do during our slow time at Madame Zoltar's. The holidays were approaching, and that meant it was time to reorganize and do all the things we'd put off while we had summer hours at Madame Zoltar's. Ebb Falls, being a tourist town, brought in a lot of business for us, which meant the donations we made from the money earned were going to make some charities very happy. Wynn, on the other hand, knew exactly what to do during our slow time. Decorate. We'd just finished up Thanksgiving, but to tell you the truth, I was still getting over Wynn and Halloween. It was a holiday he found he loved, and I merely tolerated, because when you dealt with ghosts every day of your life since you were a child, the spooky isn't so spooky. It's just yawningly redundant.